Well, good afternoon. I'm Nathan Pearl. We're here in No Greater Joy Studios. To my right, I have my daughter, Ashley Pearl. To my left, we have my mom, Debbie, and my dad, Mike. And we've been having some questions come in. And he's 79 and feeling fine.
Yeah.
Which is...
I'm not 79.
If you've ever ridden with him, you would know that's miraculous. We are going to go over some questions that came in today that Ashley has been getting for us on social media. So if you stay tuned, you might hear a question that you sent in. Go ahead, Ashley.
Okay, so here's the first one. This is a child training question. It says, is it wrong to discipline my child in public? And how do I train my 4-year-old properly with an unbelieving husband?
Mom, you want to weigh in? Dad?
How do you train your 4-year-old what?
Properly with an unbelieving husband.
With an unbelieving husband. Well, those are two different questions. Mm-hmm. So we'll deal with them separately.
Okay.
Should you discipline your children in public? It depends on what you mean by discipline. If you're in a public situation where your child is a public annoyance to everyone, then you want to calm them down. You don't want to let them run wild, but it wouldn't be a good idea to spank them. In fact, that's a very small part of discipline. So, yeah, you need to correct your children, but you need to do it in a way that will not be totally embarrassing to the child or humiliating, depending on their age, and in a way that will not be offensive to the people around you. Depends on the crowd. If you're in a very congenial, favorable crowd who agrees with everything and all your practices, then that makes a different situation. If you're in a very public situation where you got some strangers, no, just pick them up and hug them and hold them tight where they can't cut up and act crazy.
I recall this when I was young, and if we were in a public place and we did something that was particularly nefarious, as soon as we got caught, we'd look over at Dad to see if he noticed, and if he noticed, you're getting one spanking when we get home.
One lick.
Well, it depends on if we had different licks for different things. Lying was, I think, 10 licks. If we were picking on our sisters, I don't remember, it's 3. But anyway, we knew this meant that discipline is coming, and it wasn't that we spent the time fearful after that. It was that we recognized, well, I got caught, and my comeuppance is coming, and if I recall, it was quite effective.
I've forgotten about that. I remember doing that now. I have to do that again.
That means he only wants one biscuit.
That's not going to happen.
With my own kids, I viewed my the raising of the kids. They're my partners in this. In other words, I'm responsible to see to it that they walk with integrity, but we're working together towards that. In other words, I'm not just imposing on them a view of integrity. I'm saying this is our collective view of integrity. We're following God together, and a misdeed or a misaction that needs to be handled or disciplined is not just something that I'm going to discipline right there in the crowd, but I might stop and have a conversation. It depends on their age. I might have a...
Well, I'm ready to butt in now.
Okay, you butt in, Mom.
I think what people are missing a lot is communicating with their children. Like I was talking to a parent just this past week, and the child had been painting and mixing paints and very happy about mixing paints, but then when he got Play-Doh in public and he accidentally mixed 2 colors together, he fell apart. And the parent was going like, why did he do that? So I said to the little fella, do you remember when you painted? Yeah, he remembers when he painted. I said, did you like smearing the colors together? Yeah. Did you make a pretty picture? Yeah, you made a pretty picture. Then the Play-Doh makes a pretty picture too when you mix it together. Oh, he goes, a lot of discipline problems is a lack of communication. Children need to be treated like human beings, and they need to not have your will over their will, but you need to be able to let them understand why a situation is happening and to take some of the anxiety and fear or confusion out of their life by just talking to them.
Yep.
That's good.
Okay, I hope we covered that sufficiently. Let's go to the next question.
Okay. Are there ever things that you should not share with your spouse when you're married, besides harsh, disrespectful words, etc.?
I do have something to say about this one. I think that women are fast to jump on if they've got something that's bothering them, like, oh, did you see the way he treated her? It's just, and they come home even from church or from other places, and they can get their husband riled up over things that are totally unnecessary, and a woman needs to use wisdom to check herself and think, like, does he need to hear this or not? It doesn't matter how I feel about it, doesn't matter what happened. You need to, especially if you have a man that's high strung. Now, my husband, he's got a lot of wisdom. He's calm, so I don't have to worry about that with him. But when he was young, I did.
79 and maybe not feeling that fine. You're kind of sleeping a lot there, Dad. I would say that the Bible tells husbands that we're to wash our wives in the water of our word, or that Christ would do that, and we're to follow his example. So whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are good, what is edifying to your wife, that's what you share. And it's not a matter of withholding information. I don't think that a husband and wife ought to have secrets. I think that creates a seed of discontent that will grow into something that's negative. But I think that you ought to, as you're having a conversation, consider the impact of your words. So it might be that you have an issue with your wife's mother, right? Because she, whatever, made something or did something that was difficult. And you don't have to express every negative emotion that you have towards your mother-in-law to your wife. So in that sense, yes, you can keep things to yourself because it isn't edifying. Mm-hmm. But in the sense that you're keeping a secret from your spouse, I don't do that. I've had I've sat on a few boards over the years, and I told them, if you ever have something you specifically don't want me to tell my wife, either don't tell me or don't tell me not to tell her, because the moment that you say don't tell your wife, I'm going to go home and tell her, because I don't keep secrets from my wife. Now, if you don't tell me that, I'll likely forget and not tell her, so that's fine. But if you specifically say don't, then I will. And I recognize that I need her input. I need her. If you've read Dad's book, Created to Need a Helpmeet, I need the input of my wife in a lot of decisions. So without that, I'm imbalanced. So I don't keep stuff from my wife.
I perceive in this question something deeper. I don't think the question would have been asked if it was on this level. I think that the woman who asked that question has something dark in her past or something more recent that she feels like if she told her husband, it would be detrimental to their relationship. So not every family is like Nathan's, where there's been purity from the beginning and there's total honesty at all times and responsibility before God. There are many marriages that are based on lies. They came about without full disclosure and for good reasons. And if you have some dark experiences in your past that are ugly and you've confessed them to God and you've gotten past them and you think, well, maybe I should tell my husband about that. How would it affect him? Would it not be better to keep that a secret, to bury it where it belongs, than to bring it up and maybe destroy your marriage, at least create distrust with him? So think about the consequences of what you're doing and why you want to tell it or why you don't want to tell it. Mm-hmm. And then make your decision based on what is best for your marriage.
That's good wisdom.
Okay.
All right, next question.
What does grace extended to rebellious teenagers look like?
What does grace extended to rebellious teenagers look like?
Yeah.
Dad has no idea. He's never had one.
I think that people are all different.
Yeah.
And there's some people, some parents that are overly compassionate, overly merciful, overly tolerant, overly indifferent to the right and wrongs of their kids. And so they think that's grace. Mm-hmm. And so they let a lot of things slip that should be addressed. But as kids get older, it's very difficult. By the time a kid gets about 13 to 18 years old, there's this radical transition that takes place. They go from being a kid that you can just tell them, stop doing that, don't do that. And you should give them an explanation, but even if you don't, they're obedient. They stop doing it because mama or daddy said so. But when they get about 14 or 15, you say, don't do that. They're thinking, why? And they should be, because they're trying to form their worldviews and they want to know why you do this or why you don't do that. And by the time they get about 16 or 17 years old, they're about 80% adult in most cases. And you have to transition in that short period of time to treating them like you would a good friend rather than a child. There comes a point by the time they're 17, 18 years old that all you can do is persuade. You can't tell them what to do. You can reason with them. You can talk with them. You can explain why you think this way or that way. But you can't become intimidating. You can't say you're going to do this or else, because they can walk off. And what a lot of girls do is they end up running off with some jerk because they want to get away from their parents. I heard a teenager just the other day say, a girl, I think she's 16, said, I can't wait till I get old enough, I'm moving out. And it makes you wonder, what is it she's moving out? What is it she doesn't want? What's going on in the home? And I know the home, and as far as I can tell, it's a home full of joy and grace, but there's some reason she's seeking that radical independence suddenly. So I don't even remember what the question was.
79 and feeling blank. I actually just wrote an excellent article about this in the latest newsletter, so check out that article. But there's a difference between teaching and training. And when we conflate the two and you're trying to train a 16-year-old, you'll aggravate them and you will make them discouraged because you are treating them like an infant. My son is 16, and the amount of discipline that I have in his life is a matter of conversations, not anything corporal, and it hasn't been for a long time. But that started when my kids were 4 years old. When they were little bitty, I started trading off responsibility and authority. So as I saw them become responsible, I laid the authority down commensurate with their responsibility. That way, when I get to that 16-year-old, it's not this radical shift from my authority to theirs. I've already handed off in small amounts that authority. Now, as far as what does grace to a teenager look like, the same as it would for someone that isn't your kid in your house. So I see parents who have children that will come home and vape behind the house, and they're like, well, we have to have grace with them. But then when the painters come over, they say, don't do that. That smells, bother me. Go do it somewhere else. If someone's in your house, they're living with you, and they're doing something annoying, it's your house. You pay the bills. Say don't do it. And if it's your teenager, they need to start understanding those boundaries once they get outside, because when they move to an apartment building and they vape in that thing, they're going to get they won't get their deposit back. So there needs to be repercussions that are social as you would with anybody. So don't check your brain at the door when your kids are acting, as adult children, acting like lousy adults. Respond accordingly. No, you can't. You can't have a water fight in the living room. You can't smoke on the front porch. You can't come home drunk at midnight. So is there grace? Yes, but it would be similar to having a tenant that lives in the house.
That's good.
Okay.
Next question, Ashley.
Is there any biblical merit to divorcing because of toxic relationships and narcissism? There seems to be an increasingly common issue with this in our time, and also possible labels for unrepentant sin.
No. The only reason for divorce in the Bible, I've got a book on that, divorce and remarriage. The only reason for the termination of a marriage is the death of the spouse. That ends it. Or the spouse violates the covenant under which you were married, unto thee only, till death do us part. Or the person commits a act of criminal vileness, like molesting one of the children, or turning to homosexuality, or something that is illegal and unacceptable for a family to live with. At that point, the woman shouldn't divorce her husband. She should separate from him. And if possible, report him to the law and have him arrested. But there's no grounds just because of incompatibility, or just because the person makes you miserable, or because you fell out of love. That's not grounds for divorce.
Yeah.
I'm working on an article on something similar. There was a move for what do you call it? Principle-based Christianity when I was young, where you have these Christian principles, and those principles fill the relationship with God. In other words, your relationship is with God flows through these Christian life principles. And it was well-meaning and well-intended, but you cannot have a relationship with Christ by adhering to a series of principles. And people that had an evil heart followed principles, and you were expecting a good-hearted person because they were honest. They looked like a good-hearted person, but they in fact were not. And it created a lot of just difficulty with, are these principles valuable or not? So my generation or her generation threw a lot of them out. And I hear a lot of, well, I have religious trauma, or I am married to a narcissist. And I think what's happened is a lot of those Christian life principles have been replaced with psychobabble, with psychological profiling of everybody. And I don't think that when I was a kid, there were 6 narcissists in the country, and now every other person is a narcissist.
Yeah.
I think that no man has ever lived that loves not himself, right? And so in some sense, everyone is a narcissist. So when we label our spouse as a narcissist and then go out and say, well, then I just can't have a relationship because they're psychologically broken, everybody's got some measure of work that needs to be done. That's why we're growing in Christ. And you're replacing these broken principles with broken psychobabble, and neither one of them will make you holy. Neither one of them will make you acceptable to God. That's a relationship with Jesus Christ.
Well, I'd like to give some examples. We've been in ministry, 60 years or something, a long time. But over the years, one family comes to mind. We counseled this lady probably 50 times. Her husband didn't bring home, he made a lot of money. He was into computers way back before anybody else was into computers. And he made a whole lot of money, worked for a big company, and he didn't bring home any money to his family. And I mean, they did without. It was amazing. He had a big motorcycle, and he had a big this and a big that. He had all kinds of boats. He spent money and he was mean and arrogant, and his family, his own mom and dad, helped his wife and children and stuck up for them. And what is amazing to me,
buy groceries for them at times.
yeah, the wife she submitted, and she was faithful, and she helped her kids, and she wasn't a hyper spiritual by a long shot, but she was just a sweet, kind, I'm going to make it through. Well, now she is plus 50, and her husband about 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, she was faithful and going to church. Her husband didn't care what he did because he had affairs too, and he was off living with another woman. And so she would go to this church all the time. And she said about 15 years ago, this man came to her during a service and said God had spoken to him. Hope I don't cry. And he said, I know God spoke to me and told me to pray and fast for your husband, for the whole church too, because God is going to save him. And so we were aware of it's happening way back then. And so she was just thrilled that she no longer would bear the burden alone. Church started praying and fasting, and it was about, I don't know, a year later, her husband truly got saved. And of course, we wondered, that jerk, did he really get saved? But God did an amazing work for him. Well, now she's a 50 plus. She's probably pretty close to 60. And her husband adores her to such a wonderful extent. I mean, he's so profoundly thankful for her holding on and raising her children when he was not what he should have been. And the amazing thing is, her kids are in ministry. And we're talking really, really fine ministries of going out into other countries. And he just adores her family and just appreciates everything. And so her golden years are going to be truly golden. Yeah. Because I think about me and Mike right now. I told Mike yesterday, the reason they call golden years golden is because it's just golden. It's just so much fun. Because we get to, we just get to do all the things we always want to do and have such a sweet relationship. And she made that possible because she was willing. And he was a narcissist without a doubt. He was an adulterer. He was everything he wasn't into drugs, I don't think, but he was into everything else. But on the other flip side, I can give you 3 or 4 or 50 or 100 examples of women that just couldn't bear it. They just couldn't take it. They just, wouldn't listen to counsel. How could I tell them, bear it? Just grin and bear it. Because I wasn't there. I wasn't going through what they were going through. But, they won't have golden years because
she had grounds for divorce
if
she had wanted to, because he violated the marriage covenant, but she endured.
Yeah.
And in the end, it paid off.
Yeah.
Now, that's not to condemn women whose husbands were unfaithful to you and you didn't want to endure it. You don't have to, but you better think about the consequences.
Yeah, think about your years
because
later.
All the men 45, 50 years old out there floating around who are divorced, they're part of the same mix that your divorced husband will be. In other words, they're divorced for some reason.
Except they're looking for younger girls, not for 50s and 60s.
And so the world can be a dark and cruel place, and it is, and it's getting worse all the time.
There's so many women now that's 50 plus and they're alone, and it was not their fault. But if they could have just held on, then things might be different. But
I was bush hogging yesterday, and I was listening through the New Testament.
People don't know what bush hogging is, I found out.
I was doing one of the great pastimes of America that brings a sense of zen and total focus. But I was cutting the field with a tractor and listening to through the New Testament, and I was just listening through toward the end, 1st, 2nd Peter, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, Jude, and Revelation, and it struck me in 1st Peter that he talks about us being a ambassadors and pilgrims here that we're passing through. And then he goes on to say, but endure because of who you are, not because of what you'll get out of it. So he's saying don't expect, and he talks about it a few different things. He talks about hierarchical relationships, and he talks about suffering and so forth. But he says, don't live your Christian life with the expectation that you're going to receive particular goodness here. Rejoice in the suffering because of the fact that you are temporarily here, that this isn't. So when we talk about the transcendence of this, that there was a wife who put up with this garbage for so long and then received good for that happens, and sometimes it doesn't. That doesn't take away from the glory that God gets. Mm-hmm. I know a woman that's married to a guy that I think is reprehensible, and yet I think that the aroma of Christ in her life is absolutely beautiful because she's submitted not to her husband, but to God, and has said, God first, not me, and I'm giving up me for God. And I think that whether you're a husband or a wife or an employee or a missionary or a pastor or whatever the thing is that you're doing, when you live your life that way, it doesn't point to, well, do steps A, B, and C and then have good golden years. It says, I'm submitting everything to God because he's worth it, because he's given me everything. Yeah. And then that's all the glory I need. And it reflects back to him.
That's the absolute truth. But I know there's many women out there who still feel like they don't fit into any of the answers we've given. The woman she talked about who endured, her children were not suffering. He was absent the home, and she had the full raising of them. And so he was not harmful to the children in that relationship. And she was the one who swallowed the humility of his unfaithfulness. But there's some women whose children are greatly suffering, and if they continue with their husband, it's going to be destructive to them. For instance, one woman wrote to us and said that her husband would go out to the roadside stops, the truck stops, and hang out, and she suspected that he was doing homosexual acts. And then when their son turned 13, he took him. Son came back and said, yeah, Mama, I can't, it's terrible what they're doing. Now, at that point, she asked, what should we do? Well, I said, you need to call the law and tell them what's going on. And you never allow your son to go with your husband like that. And she said, well, I think I just need to leave him. I said, well, if that's what you want to do, you certainly have a right to. And you have an obligation to protect your children. Yeah. And so there are women in situations like that that are so twisted and ugly that it's hard to fit them into the principles that we give. Another woman said that her husband was robbing vehicles and took her son. What should she do? Well, turn him over to the law and get him arrested, then go to the prison and visit him and minister to him and hope that he gets saved. It probably wouldn't get more than 5 years for that. And endure as a family. So the ideal answer that we would give, I know just doesn't fit some people. But the Bible does say this: if you cannot live with your husband and you leave him, remain unmarried. That's that. So you need to think about that. If he committed adultery, you're free to marry again, or fornication, and you're free to marry again. But if that's not the case, if it's just a situation you can't tolerate, then when you divorce him, the Bible says you're to remain unmarried.
One of our favorite things is to go to Grandma and Grandpa's, whether it's these or the others. Don't underestimate the value of a continuous family. I know a lot of families that are blended. I understand that's a difficulty. God's way is the best way. It is awesome to have the heritage of parents that are married and grandparents and now great grandparents, and it makes a difference. So,
It's a blessing.
struggle through for that. Okay, next question.
Next question. Okay. Where is the line when it comes to exposure, owning a cell phone, watching movies or TV shows, listening to music, friend groups, etc.? Speaking for teenagers.
I'll take this. This is something that, of course, that's the age of my family.
Yeah.
When I grew up, if I were to have wanted to get into, say, pornography, I would have had to get a driver's license, drive to, I don't think we had anywhere in Loboville, so I would have had to have driven maybe to Dixon to find a gas station, and then the walk of shame. We actually were out bowling one time and saw a guy buying pornographic magazines at a gas station, and we all laughed at him as he came out, and that was probably mean, but it would have been difficult. It would have required money. It would have been an intentional act. The world that my sons grow up in, it takes 15 seconds with a cell phone behind a closed door. You cannot overestimate the danger presented by a individual device behind a closed door.
Yeah.
My kids have walls full of guns, multiple different kinds of guns. They have gone hunting since they're old enough to hold a shotgun, and we do not have an unlocked device for them to use. They're extremely good kids. They're involved in ministry. I could not trust them more. They just drove my new truck, the only one that's ever been mine, across the country. I have absolute total confidence in my sons, and their cell phones are not capable of getting on the internet. Any device that is capable of accessing the internet is locked in our bedroom at night. My computer is on the outside wall, and my back is facing the door, so that anyone coming in to either my office or my bedroom, the first thing they see is my computer screen. My wife has access to everything I've got. I'm radically, shockingly protective of especially my boys, with devices, and I don't think you can be too radical about it, honestly. There are people that are making millions and billions of dollars with the singular intent of advertising sexuality to your kids and changing their view of God and sexuality through it. We live in Sodom and Gomorrah. Lot was a righteous man. He was in the gates of the city espousing righteousness, and he lost his entire family. Mm-hmm. It says he was the New Testament sees Lot. It says he vexed his righteous soul day by day. So he was considered to be a righteous man right up until the end. He lost his entire family, got drunk, and fathered his own grandchildren. Sodom and where you live affects your family. It affects you. And I think that you need to be extremely careful with your phones for your kids. I don't think it can be too much. So I counsel guys, young guys, and they tell me, they've been addicted to pornography since they were 11. It started with their Xbox. It started with their, not an iPhone, but the iPod before, where you could download stuff. They could get pictures on a little screen about that big, and they did. They get around a parent's blocks that they have on the internet, and I have grieved with these guys, counseled them, prayed with them, wept with them over their sin and their inability to put it down. And it's not because they're bad guys. They're good guys. They're good men. They desire righteousness. They seek it, but early on they weren't protected. Man, if your kids wear seatbelts, they ought not have cell phones. If your kids don't eat rotten foods that make them sick, then they should not be consuming social media. If you're protecting them from genetically modified food, that is nowhere near as dangerous as social media. So it's not a casual thing. It is central to raising children to protect them from that nonsense.
We have a video that Mike did. What's it called? You know, the video he did on what porn does.
He's done a lot of videos.
Yeah, what porn does to the brain.
Oh, the science of addiction in the brain book.
Porn develops the brain physically. They can physically look on fMRIs and see videos of the brain of a porn user. It develops new pathways, and once you get all those pathways, it takes years to overcome that. And he's got a video on that, and you need to show it to your kid.
Yeah, what we discovered was, in the science of it, is that the brain of a man who does pornography transitions to look like the brain of a lesbian. So whatever it is, the twisting that takes place in his brain causes him to have something in common with lesbians. I don't understand that, but that's just the science of it. So when kids start young, it takes a radical new birth, spirit-filled life for them not to do it again. And it's rare. It's very rare. People get off drugs and stealth drugs easier than they get off pornography and stealth pornography. People get off alcohol and stay off of it easier than they get off of pornography. When I was a kid, pornography was a half-naked woman. That's all. And today, I don't know what it is, but from what I've read, it can be extremely dark, evil. And I read one author that said the goal of all commercial pornography is to turn the men and the women into homosexuals. And that's the goal of it, to destroy all boundaries, all reserve, all conscience, and just erase God and morality from the spirit and soul of the individual. And I've dealt with people, I've seen that, I've seen it. So I don't think you can be too radical. My suggestion would be, live like the Amish. I know that's not going to happen, but if you want to be, and that won't make you completely safe because some of them gone out and got into pornography. But what Nathan has did is the minimum. What he did in his home is the minimum.
The boys were at my house the other day, the grandboys, and one of them was saying, when I get a telephone, I'm going to do it like Gideon and Jacob. I'm going to have one that doesn't get the internet. And he was bragging about it. He was proud of the fact that he was making up his mind to create walls so that he did not get on pornography, because he sees so many people it just destroys the soul, destroys the brain. When you get off cigarettes, they're gone. But when you get off pornography, it stays there. And so it takes years to rebuild that brain. We have a lot of literature on this. We have books on it, and we have videos, and you really need to watch them and let your kids watch them. Read the books, too.
Let me put it this way. When I was a kid, I was a righteous kid. I was saved when I was young. But if I had if I had a cell phone, and I could have looked at pornography on it when I was 13 years old, I would have. It was just too powerful a drive not to.
I believe that that's true of every man. I am abidingly thankful that I grew up when I did, because I don't think that a young man, I think the drive develops before the ability to control the drive. I think the parents need to step in and bridge that gap. And if you wait until that drive has been exercised, then the ability to control it will never meet that. Yeah. And I counsel the young men that grew up that way, and they are broken over the wickedness that, and they're young guys. And when I got married in purity, my wife and I, close your ears, Ashley. My wife and I had great joy in exploring and learning each other and what that sort of the carnality that God created for us, and all these young men that's been stolen from them. What a savage thing to do to our society. And I'm always reminded of Lot. And I always thought, what kind of a society would have the young men and the old men outside of a house trying to gang rape a couple of guys? Like, that is nuts. There's a society that's got like grandpas and kids. We're about there. That's who.
Yeah, I think the church in America is lost to pornography. I think that church is sick in ways that cannot be recovered. And if you're one of the few that has not gone down that path, you need to put some fences up. You need to teach. You need to instruct. Kids need to be informed. They need to fear the consequences. By the time I was 16, I had the spirituality and the fortitude to resist pornography. But from 6, 7, 8 years old to maybe 13, maybe 14, I would have looked at it.
And this is a subject that dads need to be involved with. Moms do not understand the drive. You can read about it. You can study the material. You do not understand the drive that men have to be visually stimulated, that little boys have. And dads, you need to be involved with this and on top of this and direct your home in this.
I had a woman that allowed her kids to have full access to cell phones and watch whatever they want on television, and a spiritual woman. And she said that her kids were different. They were trained and they were spiritual minded and they understood. And I thought, how sad that is. She did not know. And I don't think a woman can know. My wife, after all these years, she does not understand men. She accepts it because I keep telling her, but I don't think she understands.
And of course, Dad, we don't understand women either.
That's exactly
God made us different, and this is a topic that dads need to take the lead on. You need to be involved with. And the sad thing is, so many dads are compromised, and because they're compromised, they don't want to be hypocritical and say this is absolutely, or they don't want to put a thing so that their wife can see what they've been looking at online. But Dad, you need to be involved. You need to be serious. It is your job to protect those boys. Protect them the same way that you would if my sons just went bear hunting and I said, I want you to take a pistol. I don't have one, then take mine. Take this pistol because they're bear hunting with a muzzleloader. It's got one shot, right? If you tick off that bear and it wants to eat you, you put 16 9mm rounds in the bear. And I want to protect my sons, right? There is nothing that's a bigger issue with us protecting our sons than protecting them from free internet use. So do it. Protect them.
I had one woman write and said that her husband would go into his office and shut the door, didn't want to be disturbed, and he was doing bookwork. Somehow the bookwork never got done. And so she slipped around one night, went outside, peeked in through the blinds and saw him looking at pornography. She was so enraged, she picked up a brick off the ground and threw it through the window. I don't recommend that, but I admire the woman.
Okay. Well, I think we'll stop there for today. We'll do this again sometime. If you have questions, send them in. We all are busy, so we'll figure out what the timing looks like. But thank you guys for joining us today.